Hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Ray from the Bloomfield Public Library. Thank you for joining us tonight as we discuss the value of trees. Now I'm going to turn this over to Paula. Paula is from the Conservation, Energy, and Environment Committee. Paula?
Thank you. Hopefully my audio is good. First of all, good evening and welcome everyone. First of all, a big thank you to Sarah and to the Bloomfield Public Library for co-sponsoring this kickoff program for our Trees for Bloomfield initiative. We're really excited to be at this point. As Sarah mentioned, I'm a member of the Conservation, Energy, and Environment Committee, the CEEC for short. And as your title slide shows here, the Bloomfield Beautification Committee, the BBC, and the Town of Bloomfield are co-sponsoring this very important initiative for the town. Members of the CEEC and the BBC, along with some very interested and passionate residents, have been meeting since last October to start developing a sustainable tree program for Bloomfield. And we decided that the best way to start the project was to offer a series of events in 2021 to celebrate trees and to increase the awareness of everything they do for us, the benefits of trees. We had a full page calendar of events in the Bloomfield Messenger on March 12th, and hopefully people saw that. We'll be offering webinars, guided tree walks, tree plantings, a tree pruning workshop, and a photo contest. Our next event is a guided walk at Hawk Hill Farm on April 24th. The good news and bad news is it's already fully registered, but we are going to be offering another guided walk at Farmington River Park on May 8th, the day before Mother's Day. We'll be planting trees on Arbor Day, April 30th, and doing a hands-on tree pruning workshop on May 21st. So if you didn't see the messenger, if you don't have a copy of the calendar and you'd like one, if you want more information on the upcoming events, or you just want to help out, you can send us a note at treesforbloomfield@gmail.com. Again, treesforbloomfield@gmail.com. And keep an eye on the Bloomfield Messenger. There will be stories in the green news column and ads about the upcoming programs throughout the year. And before we get over to the main event for tonight, I do want to acknowledge John Kehoe, the editor of the Bloomfield Messenger. He is a very enthusiastic supporter of this initiative, and for that we thank him. So now to the main event, the value of trees. Our speaker tonight is Arborist John Kehoe. Mr. Kehoe is well qualified to speak to us, being a second generation licensed arborist, having served as Hartford City Forester and more recently as a university arborist at UConn. And Sarah sort of mentioned how we'd be working this, put your questions in the chat. And I'm really delighted to be passing this off to John. I've taken many a tree tour with him. And so without further ado, I'll be back later. Take it away, John.
Thank you, Paula. This is a great kickoff, and it's exciting to see the residents of Bloomfield embrace, celebrate, and understand the many benefits trees provide and how they are taking local responsibility for dealing with global issues of tree loss, which leads to global warming and climate change. We have an aging urban forest within our communities, severely impacted by extreme weather events, drought, heat stress, wind and rain events. Tree damage and mortality seem to happen on a regular basis with these weather events. And as stewards of the land, community, residents, property owners, government officials, all of us, we need to clearly see the need to preserve, protect, and nurture our existing trees and to make every effort to replace them as we lose them. Today, we're going to explore the value of trees and their many benefits. All right, my screen froze. There you go. All right. I have a favorite tree, and I think everyone has a favorite tree, or at least I hope they do. And for those of you who don't recognize this tree in the picture, this is an American elm. This tree is what got me into the business. As a young man, as a young arborist, I was trying to save the elm trees. And unfortunately, it's still a battle that continues on to this day. And I've taken down a lot more than I've saved, but I've had some success taking care of these trees. So why trees? Well, trees are the most prominent and critical organism on the earth. How so? Well, just these things here, their role as Earth's carbon in the Earth's carbon cycle as the lungs of the world, in mythology, in religion, in spirituality. The tree's effect on human history, the products and impacts on the world's products that impact the world's economy, and local impact and values. So it's globally and also locally. So I'm going to get this thing over here. Okay. Trees are valued because of what they provide on a global impact. They create oxygen and they absorb carbon dioxide. We'll talk about that more in a few minutes. And as air filters and capture pollutants, there's dust and pollen and all types of things in the air that get grabbed by the leaves and by needles of trees, and they hold them and make them into inert matter, and they definitely clean the air. And if you've ever walked in the forest and early in the morning or many times with a nice little breeze, you can tell how nice the area smells. And shading and cooling we'll talk about a little bit later in the program, also with wind protection. We'll touch on that, and managing stormwater. Screening and property values will also come in, and the beauty and health benefits of trees are well known for people who'd like to forest bathe and enjoy themselves hiking in the woods and just enjoying nature. And we will talk also a little bit about wildlife. Many of the items listed here could be hour or day-long talks. So we only have so much time to discuss so many things. So we're picking a few that we're going to touch on tonight. So the carbon cycle. All right, so here we are at the top of Penwood Forest at the top of the trail, and we're looking out into the distance, all right, into the horizon, and we're taking a deep breath because we're humping our way up the top of the mountain there. So as we breathe in, we know we're breathing in air, but what other gases are we breathing in? What are we taking in? So every breath we take, we're taking in, the air there is 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, 0.93% argon, and 0.04 carbon dioxide. So that level is what sustains life as we know it. And it's a very, very delicate balance. So the carbon cycle is nature's way of recycling carbon atoms. Carbon is the foundation for all life on the earth. Carbon is required to form complex molecules such as proteins and DNA. Most carbon is stored in rocks and sediment. The remainder, carbon dioxide, in the atmosphere, oceans, and in living plants, and human beings and other animals too. CO2 helps regulate the Earth's temperature, makes all life possible, and is the key ingredient in the food that sustains us. Now, carbon atoms travel from the atmosphere to the Earth and then back again bouncing up and down. Ocean's tides move them up and down. Air currents move them. There's a constant exchange of taking and releasing carbon dioxide. And trees play a key role in mitigating greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So how is carbon released to the atmosphere? Well, continuously by surface waters. Organisms, as we live and die, as we breathe, we push out carbon dioxide. As our bodies and plant parts decompose, give back the carbon dioxide. Volcanic eruptions, forest fires, and then fossil fuels that we burn to heat and use our vehicles. So part of the carbon cycle is photosynthesis, or the creation of oxygen. So to break it down, carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is grabbed by the leaf surface of plants. The water comes from the root system, so it is carbon dioxide with water in the presence of energy, which is the sun's energy, and it goes to form simple glucose, sugars that the plant uses to live and survive, and it gives off that terrible gas, oxygen. And so that's how we breathe. It's called carbon fixation. So one leaf on a tree will have millions of cells that are solar receptors that grab the sunlight. So as the water is drawn up from the root system to the top of the tree, and it's in the leaves, the mixture of the carbon dioxide and the water form the sugars that the plant uses, the tree uses in the presence of sunlight, gives off the oxygen gas, and the carbon dioxide is stored in the stem and the leaves and in the root system of the tree. Another carbon fixation. So carbon is stored in the living tissue of the tree, in the bark, in the cambium and xylem and phloem area, and also in the heartwood, in the pith area of the tree. Their carbon sinks are what trees are called because of the amount of carbon that they hold and collect and slowly give back to the atmosphere. Now, think of the trees in the Northwest and in the Amazon, the monster trees that are there, and the amount of carbon that they hold. So trees' role in global warming mitigation, they act as those carbon sinks. The highest density of the trees are in the subarctic region, Russia, Scandinavia, and North America. And the largest forested areas are in the tropics of Central and South America, Africa, and Southeast Asia. Now, studies estimate that there are 3 trillion mature trees on the earth, or 422 trees per person. That's an estimate. Studies also show that man has removed that many trees throughout time. And how they've done that is through deforestation, land use changes, forest management practices, and waste. And deforestation, it happens in the underdeveloped countries that have that product that they can sell, and that's why we're worried about South America and Southeast Asia and the removal of the trees there, now that we're enlightened. But you have to remember deforestation, when the European settlers came across from Europe and came to North America, they were the first ones to start cutting down the forest that they saw there. And you know that the redwoods in California are close to 300 feet tall. Some are more than that. Well, when the Europeans came here, the white pines, some of them were 300 feet tall. And what did man do? We had to conquer them. We had to clear the forest. We had to take control. It was just overpowering. So now forest management, land uses, of course, when man moves in, he might want to farm. They might want to use their fields for grazing. So that's land use changes. Forest management practices. Well, forestry isn't all that ancient a science. It's actually only maybe 150 years old, really. And it was like farming. They thought that they could just harvest the crop and another one would grow. And they changed their practices over time, but still, you're taking down 500-year-old trees and you're hoping you're going to get something back in how long? 500 years in a tree's life is nothing, but in our lifetime, it's actually very significant. And waste, as I said, yes, man is a consumer. We're very wasteful, and we've used the forest for good and bad. But one example is that out in California, there was a British noble who needed a large table for one of his gatherings at his castle or wherever he lived in England. And he had one of the largest coastal redwoods cut down so that he could have a nice table for his. So yes, we do waste sometimes. So global warming, it's not a myth. Carbon dioxide in the atmosphere has been raising at a greater rate than any time in the past 800,000 years. It's super accelerated since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, and the main causes are unabated fossil fuel consumption, global deforestation, and population increases, because our population is increasing all the time, and we're using more fossil fuels, or raising more animals, more farming. And how do we know that that's true? Well, they do Earth core samples and they do ocean core samples, and they can go way back in time and they can gather the information and find out the weather, but also through dendrochronology, the study of tree rings. And they can even take lumber that the Romans used and drill it and get information out of there showing changes in climate from back at that time. It's amazing the forensic they can do now to find out what's going on in our past, or what has gone on in our past. So CO2 levels pre-industrial revolution were approximately 280 parts per billion per cubic foot of carbon dioxide in the air. 2019 estimates had it at 415 parts per million per cubic foot. So that's not double, but it's on its way to being double, and that's in 150 years. The Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science does a forecast for New England, and they say that New England, 8,000 years old since the glaciers were here the last time, and they've done their studies, and they found that in the past 100 years, the temperature here has increased 3.2 degrees in 100 years. The 10 warmest years recorded we've ever had are since 1990. And the 10 coldest years we've had were recorded before 1940. So we definitely can see a change in the weather here. And they suggest that by 2010, unabated, the weather pattern here will be like a zone 8. And zone 8 is North Carolina, South Carolina. To me, I see it now where I live a little bit further north than you, and I know I was in a zone 5, but it seems that it's more like a zone 6. We can get away with plant material that'll grow there now. So it's definitely changing. So how trees are important to slowing global warming? We got to plant trees, and that's part of it, and take care of the trees that we have presently. So the trees, of course, they're absorbing and storing the carbon dioxide. They're cleansing the air by absorbing possibly 1/4 of all the human-caused CO2 respiration, absorbing pollutants. They reduce heat, absorb water through the soil profile. They absorb water through the soil profile, preventing erosion. And scientists suggest that by planting 1 trillion trees by 2100, that would be the most effective solution to climate change. I'm going to disagree with them. I don't think that's enough. With the amount of fossil fuel we use and burn, and with the population growing, we're going to need to do as many things as possible to try to slow this down and to cut back on the use of the fossil fuels. So what do trees do for us? Now, this is a small tree. This is a dogwood or a magnolia or an apple tree you have in your backyard. So it's not a monster tree, but this one tree, it can absorb as much carbon in a year as a car produces while driving 26,000 miles. And this single tree can produce approximately 260 pounds of oxygen per year. The average person uses about 330 pounds. And in its life, a single tree can absorb 1 ton of carbon dioxide. I think they definitely have a huge value. All right. Trees and religion, mythologies, and spirituality. Trees, they're reaching up to the sky. They're in constant meditation, constant worship. So through history, trees have had some type of impact or mysticism or some type of effect on all humans. So in Hinduism and Buddhism, the banyan tree was their sacred tree. Now the banyan tree is a fig tree. And from that area of the world, figs are very, very prominent. The world tree is more with the Norse gods, and they worshipped or had the oak tree as their the tree that they acknowledged. And the tree of knowledge in Judaism and Christianity, the apple tree that was in the Garden of Eden. Tree spirits in the sacred groves from the Druids. Now, the Druids, says oaks there, the Druids were the knower of the oaks, and their sacred groves were oak trees. Now, sycamore is the Egyptian lore of Hathor. That's the tree that Hathor was the goddess of fertility. So the sycamore tree that they called was a symbol of fertility. Again, the sycamore in Egypt was another fig. Now, the gateway to life, to the afterlife, that was a Mayan belief of into the trees you went and up into heaven. And I always need to mention the Ents, Treebeard from the J.R.R. Tolkien, Lord of the Rings. They were the most ancient and wise and powerful beings in Middle Earth, but not fast to make important decisions. All right, trees' effects on human history. So all the great civilizations, the Incas, Aztecs, Romans, Persians, Greeks, Chinese, Mayans, Egyptians, Indus, and Mesopotamians used trees for food, source, fuel, shelter, construction, and tools. Chinese inventions were paper and the wheelbarrow. Mayan inventions were the use of the resin rubber. And the Mesopotamians' inventions were the chariot, the field plow, but most important, the sailboat. Now, the Egyptians, Phoenicians, Greeks, they were all mixed around the same times, and their civilizations coalesced quite a bit. But their ships that they built colonized much of the known world at the time, the European known world, along the Mediterranean. One of the ports along the Mediterranean that the Phoenicians settled was called Carthage in Tunisia. And that became one of the Romans' chief rivals. The Carthaginians were mariners, and they controlled the sea area for many years until the Romans came in, and then they started being the ruling the domain of the Mediterranean. The Vikings came in after the Romans, and they colonized all the way to the Black Sea in the Mediterranean, but they also went to North America and into the Arctic. And Leif Erikson, Eric the Red, they were mariners who went through up to the North American continent. And it was said that at that time, the ice shelf had melted a little bit, so it was easier for them to get around. That was around 1000 AD. And the Arabians, they took over after the Vikings along the Mediterranean, and then modern colonialism with Spain, Portugal, Britain, France, and the Dutch coming to the New World along Africa and out to the Far East. So, trees' effect on human history. So, as you see this picture here, you see what it took to build a sailboat. And there's so much lumber that was needed to do these. And the Chinese had their junks, the Spanish had their galleons, and the British had their frigates. And each one needed quite a bit of lumber. So these sailing vessels, we're going to use the British as an example here. They tried to use local lumber best they could, or select lumber from neighboring forests. They liked the English oak, and they used their land in Britain and Ireland, and they also purchased lumber from the Baltic Sea areas because they had more lumber there, and it was easier to get. When we were colonized by Britain, they wanted our pines. They thought the white pines were the greatest thing. They saw masts. They saw all kinds of armadas that they could build. But it was costly to bring that lumber back to Britain. So they kind of used most of their European neighbors to build. They built some from lumber from the colonies, but they did most of their own from Europe. And it took 20 to 70 acres of white oak to build one warship. Amazing. And talk about waste, because they only used parts of the trees for that. Now, chip off the old block. The shipbuilders or shipwrights were given tasks. They were given blocks of wood so that they can complete their task in the building of the ship. And each shipwright would be assigned that task, and monitored by the British government to see how much it actually cost them. And the British government found that a lot of times there were pieces of the block missing. And they found that the shipwrights were taking chips of the blocks home and using the wood to heat or cook or do some type of furnishing in their homes. So that's where the slang chip off the old block came from, the thievery of the British shipwrights. All right, we all know the products that come from trees. This is just a partial list in the food, from acorns and almonds to pine nuts and walnuts, the resins, frankincense, myrrh, rubber, solid wood, birdhouses, cabinets, charcoal to toothpicks and wine barrels, and paper and pulp, from books, toilet paper to wallpaper. So have you seen, each one of these could have been a talk on itself. We could go on for each one, and we have touched on creating oxygen and absorbing carbon dioxide in the air filters and capture pollutants. But do you see a pattern here? This is for local values. It's the same as global values. It's just we do it more on our own level here. We need to do our little part here at our home so that we can impact levels all over the world. So we are going to discuss property values. We're going to discuss managing stormwater. We're going to discuss wildlife, and we are going to discuss wind protection and shading. Okay. So this is from Michael Durr. Michael Durr views trees. He has the same list of attributes for trees, but he also adds this, where they're immense in stature and inspiring. They span generations and are spiritual, architecturally elegant. They feed wildlife, support swings, treehouse construction, climbing challenges. They're squirrel highways, bird roosts, and skyways to heaven. Okay, trees' impact on property values. So properly maintained trees on private property may increase property real estate values anywhere from 5 to 20%. And what that means is, say you have a house that's worth $350,000 and you want to put it on the market. Now, if your property is taken care of, you have some nice trees and the property looks comfortable, it looks cozy, it looks inviting. Your house will sell from anywhere from $343,000 to $348,000 because it's presentable and it's comfortable and it's inviting. So the same house in a neighborhood where very little landscaping, no trees, and it's more desolate, that house will sell, but it'll sell for $335,000 to $340,000. You're not going to get the same value for a property that is under landscaped and is not inviting. It's been proved in real estate. Now, trees on public or commercial properties have a value of their own, apart from real estate values. And to get these values, you need a professional tree appraiser. And they determine cost of repair one must pay for damaging or destroying a tree or someone else's tree. And also you get an appraiser for income tax purposes due to losses created by damage or destroyed trees from hurricanes, ice storms, tornadoes, lightning strikes, or fire. And lightning strikes are covered under homeowners. So read your policy. Any type of lightning strike is covered. trees on public or commercial properties have a value of their own apart from real estate values. I wanted to share a story. When I was city forester in Hartford in the late 2007, 2008, the MDC came into town and they needed to do a sewer separation project. And it was massive project, and there was going to be all kinds of digging in the streets and along sidewalks and a huge tree impact. Many, many trees had to come down because the project was so massive, tree roots were being destroyed and the trees would not stand up. So we worked with them as best we could to try to mitigate, to make sure that the right tree went back in the right place. And we worked with them on many, many streets. But one street in particular, they were coming into downtown Hartford and they needed to go into Bushnell Park, where there are many, many structures from the Park River project when they buried the river back in the 40s and 50s. Well, that was their destination. They needed to bring all this water there and into the Connecticut River. And so they came to me and they had a plan where they said that unfortunately we need to come right into the park, right into this area, and that tree has to go. And it was a large London plane tree that they had identified had to go. And I told them, I said, I understand this is terrible, it has to go, but I know, they said, it's going to cost us millions of dollars to go around it. We're hoping we could go right through here. I said, no problem. I said, I'll value the tree out. When I told them the tree was worth $60,000, I never heard from them again. And they went elsewhere. They went through the road and made sure that they stayed out of the park. So how individual trees are valued. Trees are valued by their size, their species, their condition, and their location. Each value is assigned a percentage. Now, this picture here is an interesting one because it's an urban tree with sidewalks that are damaged, and the homeowner, because there's so many roots lifting the sidewalk and into the area that we call the tree lawn or the snow shelf, they tried to decorate it with plants. As you see behind this large tree, there's a telephone pole or a light pole. So you know that the power lines are going through it at the same time. So this tree here is not going to have the greatest value, but any tree in an urban area, in an urban neighborhood, has a certain value. So tree appraisers, we have professional tree appraisers, and they have a standard that's set by the Council of Tree and Landscape Appraisers. And there's two formulas that they use. A trunk formula method, which it gives you a dollar amount for cubic inches of wood, and a replacement tree method, which is easier for a judge to understand. And anytime you're doing a tree appraisal, or many times you end up in court, you want to make sure that whatever you give the judge is clear so they can understand it and make a decision. So here's an example. This is the trunk formula. We have a 24-inch sugar maple in front of Town Hall. So because it's a sugar maple, it's in the 80 to 100% category, stating that it's a really nice tree, a desirable tree. Its size, 24 inches, that's a good sized tree, so that gives it another 80 to 100%. Its location in front of Town Hall, definitely a great location. So it could be another 80 to 100% value. And its condition, and we said well maintained by the town. So again, so now your four areas, you get 80 to 100% of the value. So you start with the size of the tree, and the size of the tree, 24 inches, equated out to $15,000. So the 24-inch diameter trunk estimate at 100% is $15,000. So you multiply that by the species value of the sugar maple, we gave it a 90%. So the 90% times 15,000 brings it down to 13,500. The location value, another 90%. No tree is 100% in my book. There's no perfect tree. I love them all, I do, but there is no perfect tree. So that's why I gave them a little bit lower percentage here. So the location value brought it down a little bit more. In the condition, even though it's well maintained, brought it down just a little bit more, but the established value is over $10,000. That's the trunk formula for evaluating a tree. Oh, and what I wanted to say here is in the species value, the sugar maple is in the 80 to 100% category. The sugar maple is having a very, very hard time in the north, in Connecticut now. It's a northern moving tree. It really likes the weather to be a lot colder. So we've had the sugar maples here for hundreds, thousands of years, but they don't seem to flourish as they used to. And even the maple syrup industry, they say that in the next 100, 150 years is not going to be centered in Vermont any longer. It's going to be centered up in Canada further. It's a northern marching tree. So in time, the value of the species value may drop. At one time, when I was a young man, the American elm was in the 80 to 100% category, no longer because of Dutch elm disease. All right, now here's a replacement value, something that a judge might be able to grasp onto a little easier. So a 21-inch red oak tree was removed from your yard, a private residence, by mistake. All right, so of course you're angry. Somebody came in and took your tree down. But a remedy to replace would be to replace with 7 3-inch red oak trees. Now I'm guessing right now a 3-inch red oak tree would cost $400. So 400 times 7 would be $2,800. And to install those trees would be approximately another $2,800 for a total compensation of $5,600. Many times in the industry, you can add a third $2,800 when you guarantee that the trees will live. So that's sometimes what happens in the industry, but this is a replacement example that a judge can understand. All right, stormwater retention. Now, the root systems of trees, you can't believe how massive they really are and how much water they really do absorb. The root system of trees is, you can see the drip line in this photo here, and how the tree surface roots go out to the drip line and a little bit beyond. That's a fallacy. If you could grab that tree and pick it up and rip it out of the ground, the trees would be twice the spread of the crown. And what's really interesting is that in the soil underneath, there's masses of microscopic roots that are doing all the work, feeding that tree with water and with nutrients. And they have that symbiotic relationship with the soil where the fungi that come in help the tree grab more and more water. And the mats and massive roots that are under there, it's unbelievable. You just don't know. There's 50 to 60% of the mass of the tree is underground. We don't see it. It's hidden. So it's more like that, the root systems, and they are key to gathering stormwater and retaining it and stopping erosion. And we need our vegetation to continue to do this. The grasses help, the shrubbery help, but the trees in the forest, they do the yeoman's work there. All right, in wind protection, I have a 85-foot tall black oak about 25 feet from my house. And it's pruned. I take care of it. I keep an eye on it. It's not in the same league as a red oak or a white oak. It's a little bit more brittle, but it's very functional. In the summertime, it cools my house like you wouldn't believe. And in the wintertime, it breaks up the wind. So it's protecting me. And sure, it's a little bit, but every little bit helps. So properly placed trees can save you in your heating and cooling. And so they're very, very valuable to be used in that type of situation. You can see here how they made the windbreak to slow the wind down. And it definitely does help slow down the loss of heat, and it definitely keeps you cool in the summertime. All right, so we're going to be planting trees. Hopefully the town is going to be planting all kinds of trees over the next 100 years to keep up with the global warming and the climate change and the changing of our neighborhoods. The trees that we have now, some of them are old and they're tired and they're ravaged by the weather we've had. And it's our job to start replacing, to try to put some more trees in. And what trees should we put in? Well, if you look around your neighborhood and you look what grows in the woods, those are the trees that you want to try to use because they're the ones that grow the best. So we have our native trees. We have red maple varieties, sugar maple varieties. I'm kind of down a little bit on the sugar maples, but the young ones still grow like gangbusters. So they don't really start having problems until they become real large. So sugar maples are still good. The oaks are supreme. We have Tupelo, which is also a black gum or a pepperidge. Also, it's also known as white pine grows like a weed. White pine is still a great tree. Our cherries, crab apples, willows, all types of elms now that are Dutch elm disease resistant, dogwoods, hackberry, redbud, and locusts. Now our buddy Mike Durr, he recommends all kinds of trees, but he's picked hackberry Chicagoland as a great variety, Cherokee Princess for flowering dogwood, and a Whitechapel Tupelo or black gum. And if you're familiar with Tupelo, it's a pepperidge tree. It has fruit, blue fruit for the birds, and in the fall it turns a bright red. So it's native. And the only problem with it, it has a tap root when it grows. So in the nursery, they grow it now, but it definitely has a tap root. And you have to nurture it. So, but non-native trees, they grow well too. All right, so it's not that we have to not put trees that come from Europe or from other areas. We don't grow them. So there's a whole list. There's sweet gums, all kinds of lindens, which are the #1 bee tree, Japanese maples, Korean dogwoods, cherries, crab apples, lacebark elms, London plane trees, beeches. Beeches love it here. They grow like weeds, European beeches. Hawthorns, magnolias, katsura, lacebark pine, and dawn redwood. And Mike also recommends bloodgood London plane, Great Wall lacebark pine, and LA lacebark elm. And if you've seen these lacebark trees, they have exfoliating bark, and it's very, very interesting. And the lacebark pine, it grows very, very thick, and you need to prune some of the branches away so you can view the bark. So our top 5 pollinator friendly trees are native oaks, which are native. They're all over the place here. The tupelo, all over the place here. Tulip trees, same thing, and black cherry. The only ones that aren't native are the magnolias. But magnolias grow well here, and they're easy to come by. You'll find them at Home Depot and Lowe's, and in other locations. And that's another thing. Our nurseries, it's difficult now. Years ago, there were mom and pop nurseries all over the place, and they would bring in some unique trees and some nice varieties. And not so much anymore. We have our big guys that have the big nurseries, and these specialty nurseries where they have unique and unusual trees that start at the $1,000 and $1,500 range. So we don't have as many places as we used to find these trees, and we're looking more online. So try to get friendly with your local nursery people, your northern nursery, your Pride's Corner, and Monrovia. Monrovia is in your neighborhood now. If there's ways to find individuals that work there, make a connection with them and see what we can do to bring in some of these trees that grow well in our neighborhoods. So the top 10 bee trees, linden, European linden especially, magnolias, sourwood. Now those three are not native, but they grow great here. Cherry, redbud, crabapple, locust, serviceberry, tulip tree, and tupelo. The last three, native here. They grow all over the place. Now, Doug Talame, he's a plant specialist, and he has a few that he likes that are pollinator friendlies. And he likes the red oak group, not just oaks in general, the red oak group, pussy willows, pin cherry, and he likes paper birch. He feels that's a great pollinator also. Now, oak trees, they're definitely pollinator trees. They draw all kinds of pollinators to them. And the most valuable species for butterflies, now look at this. Oak trees draw 534 different types of butterflies, and cherries, 456 types, right along the line. But even elm trees get 213 different types of butterflies that visit them. Amazing. So these are all things that grow in our neighborhood and that we could use and encourage to grow in our communities. So the hackberry tree has a special hackberry emperor butterfly that goes to it. And there's a group that goes to Cedar Hill Cemetery in Hartford on the Wethersfield Newington line. And they go there to visit and wait for the hackberry emperor every year. And they come out of there telling me that it's elusive because they've gone there for a number of years and they never see it. So if you have hackberries in your community, maybe you can talk with the Lepidoptera people and you might be able to help them out with the elusive hackberry emperor. And the swallowtail butterfly, that's another favorite of Doug Talame. And the swallowtails, there's all different types and they all like our native tulip tree. And if you've seen the flowers of tulip trees in June, you'll understand why the butterfly head for them. Now we have our wildlife considerations. I asked to talk about this just a little bit. I had a little bit of deer problem this past year. They came in and they were nibbling around and I knew they'd be here. I had to treat my plant material to keep them back. The deer, they're just going to keep coming because it's difficult to control. There's not enough hunting we can do to keep the population down. We also have problems with chipmunks, raccoon, bear, turkey, quail, and woodpeckers. The woodpeckers are telling us that we've got some hollow trees or we have weak trees and they're finding the bugs that have invaded those trees. That's what they're doing. They're telling us that we have other type of insects that are working on our trees because they're opportunists. That's what they go for. The chipmunks, I wish somebody would tell me how to get rid of them because my chipmunks are terrible in my vegetable garden. They don't really bother my trees, but I had to mention that they're there as a problem. And I don't have any bear that I've seen in my town, but I know that there's a lot of bear in Bloomfield and that they can be a problem. They can come in and mark their territory and rip some branches off trees, climb your trees. So they're there as a problem in your neighborhood. And as a young tree man, I had a gentleman that was climbing trees for me, and he ascended a tree because we were going to remove it. And he got up maybe 25, 30 feet, and all of a sudden he came down like fast. And he didn't jump. He came down as quick as he could. And I said, "What's the matter?" He says, "There's a squirrel up there that you wouldn't believe how big it is." Well, that was a raccoon living in a hollow spot of that tree. And they can be terrors if they're confronted. And my bird condominium is my holly hedge. I've had families of cardinals that lasted in there for years and all types of wildlife there. So who are tree people? Tree people are our loggers, our woodworkers, our tappers, our orchardists, tree huggers like yourself, and tree hunters, academics, educators, scientists, landscapers, nursery workers, arborists, and horticulturalists. So I'm going to leave you with this thought from Aldo Leopold. When we see land as a community to which we belong, we may begin to treat it with love and respect. And with this Trees for Bloomfield initiative that you have begun, I feel that you guys are going a long way to attaining that goal. Good luck with that in the future.
Thank you, John. Let me
I'm
do some
working on it.
technical aspects here to get our chat moderation onto the screen. So give me one more second to get into gallery view to get John and Paula onto our big screen. Okay, let me send Paula an unmute. Perfect.
Okay.
Take it away, Paula. Thank you.
Here we go. Okay, our first question is from Sarah Ramsbottom. How do you find a reputable arborist? I have a lovely maple in my yard that I fear is dying. Lots of dead branches.
You can still hear me, right?
Yes.
You have to start by looking in the yellow pages. You would go to the larger companies, but I would contact at least 3 and bring people in, hopefully for a free estimate, and have them and quiz them. Ask them their background, ask them, what other trees have they pruned, and get as much information as you can, and you get a feel for a person. And doesn't always work that way. There's times where you get the wrong contractor, you get that, you just pick the wrong person, but try to shop, try to talk to as many people. And then you can also call the Connecticut Tree Protective Association. They have a list of arborists that'll be in your area, and they might be able to lead you to one who is more reputable. Problem is there's many, many tree firms out there now that are doing removals, and that's what they're geared for. They have all the big equipment to do that, and it's tough with them. And I see somebody has said Graver in Wethersfield. Graver's reputable. He's been in business for a number of years. There's reputable ones out there, and it also comes with a price. The good ones are a little bit more costly, and what happens is that many people see that tree work is expensive. And so you're going to spend $1,000 to prune the tree because you love the tree. But there's guys out there saying, man, for $700-800, I'll take it down. And see, that's what happens there. You see, it takes thought to prune the tree. You've got to look at it. You got to make decisions on what branches to leave and which ones to take and which ones are going to be beneficial to help the tree be healthy in the future. When you're removing a tree, it's cut. And so I hope I answered your question.
Great. Thank you, John. And you mentioned Graver Tree in Wethersfield, and that was from Gail. So thank you, Gail. While other people are thinking of questions, I jotted down a few thoughts along during your presentation. You said when you were talking about ultimately we're going to be more like Zone 8. I think the date you threw out was 2010. Did you mean 2100?
That's what I meant. Did I say 2010?
You did, yeah.
2100, yes.
2100, okay. I also want to do just a mention, you talked about the value of hackberries, hackberry trees for the butterfly in particular, and we are planting some hackberry trees during our Arbor Day planting. So
excellent.
Just wanted to throw that out. And then another quick comment about black bears. We had our first sighting in my backyard yesterday, and I think this may be the very same large bear that's been about 1.5 miles away. It was a big male, and boom, there he was out there. So time to take the feeders down. And we have a water garden, which brings them in. But the story I really wanted to share was we had this small service berry that we got through North Central Conservation District one year that we planted in our backyard. And we had this thing staked, and the tree kept getting knocked down. We couldn't figure out what was going on. And as it turns out, we have a tree service. We use Bartlett tree experts to maintain our trees. And the arborist told us it was probably a black bear knocking the service berry down. It's fine. We just kept putting it back up, and it was a young tree, and it did okay. But your comment, normally we have no issues. They're just kind of moving through, but that bear caused some issues. And let's see, one other thing I wanted to mention, you talked about Doug Talaby and some of his favorites. I'm going to do another little promotion here. He's offering a webinar or doing a book talk through the Granby Public Library. And I just wanted to mention that that's on March 29th from 6:30 to 7:30. That was circulating on email. So if people are interested in Mr. Talamy, that's coming up. So if people have questions, please, type them in the chat. Okay, I have one more for you. And this can be a little bit controversial because, one of the things we're going to be looking at is the question of invasives and invasive trees. And I know, one of the trees that is considered to be more invasive is the black locust tree. Mm-hmm. But the other thing that I've read about those trees, and I think maybe is true of trees, is the fact that they're sort of migrating in response to climate change. Their range is naturally, maybe moving northward. The same things that happen with our songbirds and our animals. Kind of everybody's moving to where it's cooler and higher. They need to do that. So, would you care to comment on that?
Well, humans have moved trees for years from different areas. And the black locust was one that out in Ohio, out that area where it's more native to, it grew so well and it was used for cooking. And the wood is like iron. When you put a saw to it, a chainsaw, you'll see sparks. It's that hard. But when the pioneer women cooked, it cooked with a nice even fire, so an even heat. So when they baked bread, it was the perfect wood for baking bread. So we kind of moved it here. Will it start coming by itself with global warming? Absolutely, absolutely. As the trees as well as the animals, they're all opportunists, and when the conditions are right, they're going to start growing here. And there's been talk of certain varieties of trees that grow down south that they'll be moving up here now. I know they're trying to do certain crepe myrtles that they've been trying to bring in, and mine, they die right to the ground. I haven't had any that stayed high, but down Meriden, which isn't that far away from us, there's several plants that have flourished. So it's coming, it's moving this way. There's other types of hackberries that grow down south that I'd be interested to see if they grew here. There's a cherry bark oak that is similar to our red oak that has a nice grain of wood, and it grows in zone 6. I can see trying that here. I don't know if it'll flourish. I don't know if it likes the soil. But
Okay. Actually, several questions have come in while you were answering the question. First, Sarah Ray just put a note that John has a list of book recommendations, and she will email that along with information about other upcoming events. Let's see. Kevin Goff, what are your thoughts on the future of ashes here and across the country?
well, let's hope that they linger in the woods, and that when there's not enough for the emerald ash borer to eat, it will end its existence. It will fade away because there won't be a food source for it. And I'm hoping that happens. You can talk to, there's a doctor at the Ag Experiment Station. His name is eluding me right now. But he did research on the EAB, and he's done research, he's done work on the black vine weevil. I don't know if you're familiar with the black vine weevil. The black vine weevil was a scourge in the nursery industry for years. It eats rhododendron, yews, hemlock, and it comes out first days of summer and chews on rhododendron leaves, and you see little bites in the leaves. But the rest of the year, it eats the roots. So it's like a strawberry root weevil. There was a number of them. Well, that's no longer a problem. It's gone. The population's crashed. And so what was a problem 25, 30 years ago is now gone. Could it happen here? I'm hoping. Hemlock woolly adelgid, still there, but it's not in its epidemic proportions that it was back in the 80s. They did a number. They destroyed many, many hemlocks. Your Penwood forest got decimated by the hemlock woolly adelgid. But they're slowly coming back, and because there's not so many of them now, the food source isn't there, so they're struggling. Cold winters helps knock the population down. We haven't had a cold winter in a few years now.
Okay. Somewhat of a related question from Nancy Bowden. What do you think about eradicating some trees that harbor invasive insects? Example being the tree of heaven and the spotted lanternfly.
Well, we hopefully do not have the spotted lanternfly yet. We've had sightings where they said we've had 1 or 2 dead ones that they've identified. The tree of heaven, well, that's the tree that grows in Brooklyn. And it's a famous tree, and it's not my favorite, but some places it's all they have, and it'll take over all kinds of waste areas without a problem. But as a food source for the spotted lanternfly, I think we should use them as traps, because if they're going to go there, so we grow them and we know the spotted lanternfly is going to go there, and then we can try to control it from that point. But unfortunately, spotted lanternfly is getting like it doesn't really care. It goes to many different trees now. It's not so particular just to go to the tree of heaven. So it can put its eggs on the fender of your car under the wheel well, and you could drive it. So they've laid their eggs in many, many spots, and when they hatch, that's where they'll be. It doesn't have to be the tree of heaven.
Okay. Nancy Klein would like to know, how sturdy are tulip trees and how long does it take for them to reach maturity?
It's a good question. Sturdy, well, they grow fast and they are brittle. And they've been known as tulip poplar. And if you're familiar with any poplar or cottonwood or aspen, they break easy. They're in that family and they do break easy, but they grow very, very fast. And at maturity, what do you mean by maturity? When do they flower? Or when do they get monstrous? There's several large tulip trees in Old Weathersfield. There's a real large one in near Avon Old Farms, in that area over there. And I'm sure if I as I walk through Penwood Forest, there's all kinds of tulips in there. And sizable, yeah, sizable. They're not, the size of cars, car hood, but there are a few around. So how long for maturity? Fast grower, I'd say 50, 60 years.
Okay. And I know there are some nice tulip trees near Lake Louise and Penwood. So, yeah. All right, let's see. Nancy Bowden is asking, how do we balance tree trimming with storms that result in power outages?
Well, that's always a tough one, because when I was the city forester in Hartford, I cared about the trees in the neighborhoods. Many people didn't care. All they cared about is, I want my heat and my power in the winter. I don't care about those trees. They cared nothing about property values. They cared nothing about urban wildlife or urban greenery. So I had to be the person that would talk to them and make sure that they understood that we have a value of our trees. We just don't cut them or allow the utilities to come through willy-nilly. But you can work with the utilities. The utilities, most of the tree arborists that work for the utility are nice people that really care about the trees. But you have situations where you have weak trees hanging over the power lines, and that in that terrible cold night in January, that tree is going to come on the wires, and there's going to be 2,000 people without power. And 1,900 of them are going to be calling, and they're going to be screaming about the tree. So you need to balance that with right tree in the right place. So I don't know if they still have a program where they'll replace, but that's something that you need to talk to your utility about and try to make them come in and install the trees that will grow up to 30 feet under the power line and can give us a little bit of carbon sequestration and a little bit of oxygen and maybe some fall color and some ornamental flower, something that's a pollinator. And you need to talk to them and keep talking to them about that. And you got to keep that line of communication open, because they spend millions of dollars pruning every year. Recently, it was $72 million they're going to spend in Connecticut pruning this year. Now, I think I know they targeted East Haddam. East Haddam, maybe in 10 communities they targeted, but East Haddam is heavily wooded. And I know it's really bad there along the roadway. And they have those big dips where the aerial lifts are having a hard time getting at the trees. So it's communication. They spend a lot of money pruning. And if they're going to spend that kind of money, you want to talk to them and have them in your community doing the right pruning and hopefully even installing the right trees in the right place.
Great, and thank you. And maybe that's something that our tree group can do, is develop a better relationship with our utility Eversource here in town. So
Absolutely. And then because you know them, you can call them and you have them. You got their ear.
right.
It's going to be adversarial otherwise. And it happens that way, especially in storms, because I get it. The October storm, it took me 10.5 days before I could take a real shower. You know, boiling the water on the gas grill and taking it in the shower and pouring it on my head. You know, we've all been there. So.
Yeah. Okay. Gail is just offering a comment. Kentucky and West Virginia are doing black walnut syrup. As you mentioned, sugar maples are moving north. Interesting.
That's interesting. Black walnut syrup. I have no experience with it, so it'd be hard to give an answer on that. I'd be interested in hearing how it is. Yeah. I know that when I handle black walnuts, it's difficult to get the black dye off. So, what process are they using to make the syrup?
Right.
And then I don't know if I'd want to use it. Okay, black walnuts are also known to be allopathic, where their roots suppress any plants that grow around them. So it's allopathy is like having a natural herbicide in their plant juices. So it'd be interesting with the black walnut syrup.
All right. Let's see. Ron Marchetti has a question. We have spent thousands to try to save our ash. Do you have any resources for help?
I don't know what Ron has, if he's talking thousands in his yard.
I think money. I think
thousands of dollars in his yard.
We have spent thousands, so a lot of money, I think, to try to save the ash.
And the question is, how successful was he? Because at Yukon, in the forest around Yukon and at Yukon itself, there's a lot of ash trees. If in my town, if there's 2% ash trees in the woods, there's a lot. And I'm in Broadbrook, East Windsor. In Mansfield, there's 20 to 25% ash in the woods. And there's quite a big population on the campus at Yukon of ash trees. And we treated them before the borer got there and up to this day. And we lost none. The only trees we lost, they were large and they were hollow and they started to fall apart. We had no choice but to take them down. But we've lost no trees on campus to the emerald ash borer, and it's all around us. Now I'm talking campus trees. If you drive up Horse Barn Hill on campus and you do the perimeter drive and you look in the woods, there's dead ash trees everywhere. But on campus proper, the ash trees have been treated and they're flourishing. So if he spent thousands on treating his ash trees, I'm hoping his ash trees are still alive, that what he did or had done was effective.
Yeah, and he has a comment a little bit later in the chat. They have one ash tree in their yard, and obviously they're worried about it dying. There was a nice ash tree at Town Hall, on the corner, and that recently had to come down, unfortunately. So it's tough. It's tough to see the ashes around, in the woods and along our residential roads, dying back, obviously. So,
See this happen. It is, but
yep. All right, let's see. Zelene Sandler's question. Do you need to fertilize trees when young or when older?
very good question. You fertilize young trees. You try to give them that little kick that would make them start to grow and flourish. And then by the time they're, I'd say 10 years old or so, you can let them go. They can do it on their own, because those roots, a healthy root system is exploring and finding every avenue to try to make it flourish. You'll fertilize older trees if you see that they're having a problem, if they're starting to get weak. And you need an arborist to help you with that. If you see that the leaves are tiny, they're not really getting to be the size that they were at one time, that's when you need to call an arborist and do a soil test, find out what's missing, and see if you can give it a little bit of nutrients that way. Most of the problem we're having is drought. And trees are going to try to grab water wherever they can. And that is our big problem. There's just not enough moisture in the soil to sustain all of these trees. And the larger trees, because they have the larger canopy, they start to lose a branch here and there. And sometimes it continues and you lose even more.
All right. Let's see, Jim Trail has a question about wooded areas near homes. How should those areas be cared for to minimize risk of fire damage to the houses if fire in those wooded areas occur?
That there, depending on the size of the trees. Now, if you've got 24 to 30-inch trees, right, you're probably not going to have much fire problem. You might have more tree failure. And if a tree falls, it might come your way towards your house. So it depends what distance the trees are from your house. But say you're in a wooded area and the trees are fairly close. It again depends if they're evergreen or they're deciduous trees. So under your evergreens, you're going to have drier conditions and it'll be easier for a fire to start. And that's why we have the great fires out west, because the sequoias and the Douglas firs and all those monster trees out there, those are evergreens. And they drop huge amounts of foliage every year. And it's tinder. And it starts and it just keeps going. Around here, our soils aren't like that. Not like that at all. So we have a lot more organic matter in our soils here. So the soil moisture content is greater here. But still, if you've got an evergreen base, you're more chance for fire versus deciduous where. And again, understory. If there's a lot of vegetation that may be apt to burn, you might want to do some clearing to keep it back from your house. So if the woods are close within, 50 feet of your house, you might want to be doing a little bit of clearing of the undergrowth so that there's an airflow in there and you would maybe have a less chance of having the fire spread.
All right. Very informative. Actually, at this point, we've been through our questions. Doing a time check, it is 7:55. So we're coming up on 8 o'clock. And, I want to thank you, John, for a really informative, complete presentation. And actually, I'm thrilled by the fact that I believe we'll be doing a tree walk with you in the future, right?
We're doing a tree walk and we're doing a pruning exercise.
All right, we'll see you twice. So
and right, yeah. And when we do the pruning exercise, we'll do a little, we'll do a little talk first, get the, parameters down, and I expect everybody to bring their pruning tools. I'll bring mine plus, but I want you to bring your favorite pruning tools so that I'm not doing the pruning. This is so that you could learn.
Yeah. Well, excellent. And again, just to close out, I want to remind everybody, if you don't have a copy of the calendar, we're going to be trying to get the word out through various, listservs in town. The library is going to be partnering with us, leisure services. We have some, private organizations in town, jumping up. And again, treesforbloomfield@gmail.com. If you want information, send us an email. If you want a copy of our calendar, you don't have that, send us an email. So again, thank you very much, John, and we look forward to riding again with you.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.